Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Annual General Meeting of Wounds Australia. My name is David Price. I'm an independent chair. I've been engaged to chair this meeting on behalf of the board. May I welcome you all, especially to this meeting. May I give an acknowledgement of country, please. We as a gathering of Wounds Australia acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet collectively throughout the country. We pay respect to all Aboriginal peoples and families, past, present and future, who have nurtured this land. And finally, we extend respect to other Aboriginal and First Nations people who are present with us today. We have not received any apologies to date. The event is available to attend virtually, but I have been asked to set the scene, if you'll allow me to do that. As many of you know, Wounds Australia has a long and proud history improving patient outcomes through the tireless work of our members. Our predecessor organisation, AWMA's foundations, go back to the early 1990s and began the journey to the national organisation we have here today. Since formation of Wounds Australia in 2016, we have matured significantly and are now ready to progress into the next phase of the organisation's progression as the national peak body for wound prevention and management. Next item on the agenda is verification of the minutes of the 2020 Annual General Meeting. That has been done electronically and it has been carried. There were 23 votes in favour of that resolution. We move now to item 3 on the agenda, which is an address from the board chair, Hayley Ryan. So Hayley, I'll throw the meeting to you.
Thank you very much, David, and it's an absolute privilege to report to you as chair of the Wounds Australia board tonight. The 2020-2021 financial year was one of continued organisational change for Wounds Australia, whilst balancing the challenges encountered during a global pandemic. And as an organisation, we have further enhanced our governance structures, processes and procedures, which will enable us to support our long-term sustainability and success. COVID-19 has continued to affect almost every organisation across Australia throughout the 2020-2021 fiscal year, with lockdowns and border closures creating significant disruption and limiting many organisations' ability to stabilise, not to mention the clinicians on the front line, who have worked so hard and in some cases needing to be redeployed to support the fight against COVID-19. And I know that this speaks to many of our members who may be on tonight. We are also fortunate to have the Wounds Australia's incredible team of staff and volunteers who have shown great resilience, continuing to plan and organise events across the country in the knowledge that they may in fact be cancelled at short notice. Our events have adapted to these restrictions with an increased focus on the use of technology and live streaming and webinars to deliver a high quality educational program to those unable to attend face-to-face. Wounds Australia continues to maintain its very strong position and is successfully withstanding and responding to the impacts of COVID-19. Our achievements this year have included the 2020 Wound Awareness Week with an estimated campaign reach of 2.7 million, including 239,000 registered healthcare professionals. This campaign continues to grow year by year, and this has been evidenced by this year's Wound Awareness Week. We were lucky enough to meet with Minister Greg Hunt, who verbally committed to many aspects of the 11-point plan. There was the launch of the Wounds Australia Clinical Advisory Panel in December 2020. We also put together the publication of the application of aseptic technique in wound dressing procedures, a consensus document, the 3rd edition. There was the release of the Wounds Australia Strategic Plan for 2021 to 2023. There's been ongoing representation to government bodies as part of the advocacy campaign and corporate partnerships with industry establishing, including support for our advocacy activities. There was also the successful delivery of the postponed 2020 National Conference in a virtual format. There was the establishment of roles, responsibilities, process mapping, and lessons learned from frameworks. And Wounds Australia's support and guidance of the primary healthcare quality and coordination program, the Wound Management Pilot. I would like to really acknowledge all of our volunteers, especially our committee members who generously contribute significant personal time and skill to ensure Wounds Australia is able to provide such beneficial outcomes to our members and the broader society. We send our thanks to you and also our board members, Simon, Annie, Cindy, Jenny, Katie, Pam, Tao and David, for their tireless commitment as volunteers also, and to the National Office team, Blake and Corinne, for their unwavering contribution and continued efforts to deliver to our members. A special acknowledgement to Blake for his commitment to Wounds Australia, and whilst this may be his last AGM with us, we know that he has been instrumental in our success over this year. Planning is certainly underway for the Wounds 2022 conference with a great deal of energy and excitement. Kerry May has been appointed as chair of the Wounds Australia 2022 Executive Committee, and Dr. Peter Tehan has been appointed deputy chair, whilst Terry Swanson has generously agreed to chair the scientific program. In acknowledgement of the challenge of the past 2 years and the excitement and anticipation we all have at the thought of coming together to share, to learn and collaborate, they are thrilled to advise that the theme of the Wounds 2022 conference will be time to heal, time to unite and time to innovate. I couldn't think of anything better. The team have hit the ground running and set about organising everything that needs to happen, and I'm sure this will be yet another fantastic conference. Finally, to our members, we thank you for your continued support of Wounds Australia and for assisting with our work to reduce the harm caused by wounds. Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Hayley. For those listening in, you will have the chance to ask questions. If you use the Slido app, which you've all been given the information for, you can place your questions there. But please be aware that if the questions are anonymous, then the board is not going to answer those questions. So you do need to put your names on the question. And you can put those up now. We've already got 5 questions that people have put forward, which we'll answer when we get to item 9 on the agenda. But at the moment, we're moving to item 4, which is the address from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Blake Wilson. Blake.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Hayley and the board. Hayley's address was brilliant. She stole all of my points, which is exactly what she should have done. That's why she gets first dibs on the agenda always. But as Hayley said, look, we've had a really interesting year in the journey of Wounds Australia. It's been a hard year with COVID. Every organisation has a hard year. All of our members and clinicians would understand exactly how complicated it is to run an organisation, particularly a volunteer-based organisation and a charity nonetheless. Yet despite those great challenges, we've had enormous success, enormous support with our membership. Membership has continued to grow and become more and more strong over the time, which is brilliant. Our volunteers in our states and territories have worked tirelessly to put on brilliant events, or sometimes plan brilliant events that didn't quite come to fruition and had to be postponed again and again and again. And that's really tiring because it's a whole lot of work to put on an event. It's a whole lot of work to put on the same event multiple times. So we take our hat off to our volunteers because they've done such a stellar job and really looked after the organisation's interests and tried to make sure that education and training is available. Our introduction of online streaming before COVID started was really at a perfect time because it has allowed us to reach more people than ever before with our streaming. We've been able to get education out to remote and rural locations, which is particularly important for the organisation, the staff in the organisation, and actually part of the board's strategy, which was certainly confirmed this year. So really great to see some of these initiatives pick up, actually come from concept into reality and start delivering great benefit to those people on the ground and ultimately patients, because that's what we're doing. That's what the whole reason we exist for. Going to what the board's work has been over this year has been phenomenal. There's been a huge amount of effort the board has put into really focusing on a good long-term strategy for the organisation. I'm sure everyone got to see it, and if you haven't, it's on the website. I thoroughly recommend you download it and have a look. But the board has put together a really high-level strategy to focus on the future of Wounds Australia not now, not in like 2 years, but well into the future, and really position Wounds Australia as a sustainable entity that will deliver really big impact to patients and meet our mission of reducing the harm caused by wounds. Obviously, I have to say a big thank you to all of our volunteers who have supported the organisation and me personally through my tenure here. The staff of Wounds Australia, particularly our General Manager, Corinne, and our dedicated teams. We've got Pretty, Di, who I'm sure everyone knows Di, who's been around for so very, very long. Like I said, Pretty, our brilliant marketing manager. We've got Lavinia in the office, Alison in the office. I keep making my tongue tied. Lisa, and we can't forget Sherry, who works so tirelessly dedicated to our financial arrangements. The core team are so dedicated to the success of Wounds Australia, and it's only with the successful staffing, successful focus from the board, and the support of our members and volunteers do we have such a brilliant and vibrant organisation. That is being shown with some of the work which we've been able to do, particularly around advocacy that Hayley spoke about. We're finding that we're getting more and more traction over time. The year that we're reflecting on now, which obviously last financial year was one of great change and evolution for the organisation, and we got some great runs on the ground. We're starting to see the realisation and the outcomes associated with that right now in this year, which we'll get to talk about obviously at the next AGM. But particularly, as Hayley said, we've come off a great meeting with the Minister Hunt. The support from government for the initiatives of Wounds Australia has never been stronger. It really sets us up to materially change the way health is operated in this country and benefit patients and clinicians alike. So with that, I'll happily answer questions at the time on the agenda, but it's been really great to be part of the journey, and I look forward to watching the organisation thrive into the future. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Blake. As Blake has said, you'll have the chance to ask both him and Hayley questions in a few minutes when we get to that part of the agenda. We're now on item 5, which is the financial report, the auditor's report and the annual financial statements. To present those, I'm going to ask Simon to speak.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome and thank you to all the members for attending the 2021 Annual General Meeting in what has been an incredibly difficult year, second time running, and the board thanks each and every member for their contribution in the fight against COVID-19. I wish to touch on some key points on the financial performance for the year ended 30 June 2021. That despite the organisation generating a loss, there has been some significant achievements. Regarding the conference, the virtual conference delivered a final profit of $23,209, with $20,000 of that recognised in the year ending 30 June 2021. It's important to note that in the lead up to the conference, the board assessed options for the conference with the ongoing impact of COVID-19, both from the ability to deliver and also the financial impact. In August 2020, the board considered all options, including providing a hybrid event, a postponement until 2021, and cancellation. Through the modelling, cancellation was the least desirable, with potential contractual exposure of more than $500,000. Any potential government compensation was subject to the approval of the government, with limited funding pools and an assessment process. Therefore, upon assessment, the risk and exposure, a fully virtual event was decided. The board are pleased to be able to deliver this event and also post a modest profit. Partnerships and project income has been a success story of 2021, as Blake has touched on as well, with income generated from successful projects, including but not limited to the Wounds Awareness Week and working closely with our corporate partners. It is important to note that the organisation has received considerable revenue of $316,000 in advance, which is detailed in note 11 on the financial statements that have been made available to you. This revenue has been received, but not recognised in the profit and loss statement. It's important to note because despite that it's not being able to be recognised in the profit and loss due to accounting standards, we have actually earned it in terms of our cash position. This revenue will be recognised over the next 12 months as services are delivered, and therefore it'll be put through the profit and loss statement, and you'll start to see the results there. The organisation has received government support via the federal government's JobKeeper, which is a partially wage subsidised program, and Cash Flow Boost, a program where the government provided employee withholding tax coverage. Both of these packaged were introduced by the federal government to assist in the retention of staff and have provided a great level of support during the COVID-19 period, particularly with our inability to run many face-to-face events, which has been one of the cornerstone services for your members. The impact of COVID was felt most on events, with events revenue declining due to the inability to hold many face-to-face events. We would hope to see this increase in the second half of the 2022 financial year with the easing of restrictions and the vaccine rollout. With our membership revenue, we've had an increase in membership revenue, and it continues to be an area of focus for the organisation as we are seeking to increase the number of members and also our revenue. The organisation has still retained solid cash reserves throughout the pandemic, despite great uncertainty in the economy. The organisation has pivoted into working closely with our corporate partners. I would like to thank the CEO and the staff for their contribution and dedication that has assisted greatly during the pandemic and ensuring the organisation remains a going concern financially for the members in the Greater Wounds community. Pursuant to Section 317 of the Corporations Act, the 2021 audited financial statements of Wounds Australia Limited have been provided in the annual report and have made available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. You will have the chance to ask some questions. We do have a point of order that has been raised in relation to the quorum, and that is whether the board members are included in the number that you can see. And the answer is no, they're not, but they are included in the quorum. So you're seeing a number of 26, however, the board is not included in that 26. So the quorum has been achieved. This is a quorate meeting. We move now to item 7. Which is the outcome of the electronic voting on the continued appointment of Hardwick's Chartered Accountants as the auditor for Wounds Australia for 2021-2022 financial year. This resolution was done electronically, and the vote was 35 in favour and 1 vote against. And so I declare that motion carried. And so Hardwick's Chartered Accountants are appointed as the auditors for Wounds Australia for 2021-2022 financial year. We now reach item 9, which is the opportunity for members to ask questions, and we have questions. I will read the questions out. They've been sent to me, and I will ask for a board member to respond to those questions. I will take the questions in the order that they have been sent and that they appear on my screen. So the first one we've just dealt with, which was, do we have a quorum? And yes, we do have a quorum. The next question, I will read the name of the person who's asked the question. The question is from Terry Swanson, and it is, why has the expenditure of the board increased when no face-to-face meetings occurred? That's the first question. There's a follow-on question which I'll get to. Simon will answer this question.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the question, Terry. There was, despite no face-to-face meetings, the increase in board expenditure relates to training in terms of specifically on governance training, which assists the board in able to deliver their duties in a much more efficient way for the organisation.
And the follow-on question is the interim CEO being paid?
The interim CEO is not being paid so at all, because that's a part of our constitution, is that all directors in performing any duties are not able to be remunerated.
Next question, also from Terry Swanson. What criteria do you base the Best Ever Wounds Awareness Week? And the comment is that I do not agree with that perception. Who would like to take that? Thank you, Blake.
Thank you for that. So the measure for the last financial year, so we're talking 2020 being the Best Ever Wound Awareness Week, which of course it is no longer the Best Ever Awareness Week, that was this year's one. But it was based on the total reach of the campaign, which I believe was 2.7 million for that campaign. It was certainly particularly the reach associated with the clinicians and the impact that it had with government, which all exceeded anything that had happened cumulatively in the past.
Next question, also from Terry Swanson. Why has the board expenditure increased? Simon?
Yes, we believe we just answered the same question. So
fine. Also from Terry, do we only have enough funds for staff salaries for a year?
We have more than enough coverage. We have over $1 million in cash, and that would assume that the organisation generates no revenue at all. So the answer to the question is yes.
I think that is all the questions I have at the moment that have been put before me, except to let you know that the situation regarding a quorum is being monitored, so we remain quorate. Are there any other questions which anyone wishes to ask? Please use Slido to put those forward, and they'll come up, and I'll ask direct your question to one of the board. We'll wait a minute or so because I'm not quite sure how quickly the technology is working. We're using 2 bits of technology to do this. So if you'll bear with us, we'll just wait a moment to see if there are any further questions.
And if we can just make sure that if you're asking a question that it is with a name attached to it, so it's not an anonymous question. As stated earlier, the board isn't in a position to be able to answer anonymous questions.
If there are no further questions, this may be a record short annual general meeting.
David, just because we are using technology, we'll just give it another few minutes to give all our members the opportunity to respond.
That's what I thought you'd say, and that's what I intended to do. We do have another question now from Terry Swanson, and the question is, why has the cost of the lease increased? Simon?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Terry. So the lease has increased because of accounting standards, and it's amortised evenly over the term of the lease. And this is the full year that we've actually been in the office. So, thank you.
Thank you. As Hayley's just said, we will wait because of the technology that's being used, so that people are given the opportunity to ask a question if they wish. Please, as Blake has reminded you also, please make sure your name is with the question. Have a question from Tabitha Rando. The meeting with the health ministers, are the details regarding the outcome? I presume you mean what are the details regarding the outcome? Who can take that? Thank you, Blake.
Thank you, Tabitha. It's a pretty exciting development, obviously not to do with the previous financial year. It's a very recent development. The details of the meeting are obviously confidential because they're held with a senior government official, being the health minister. The minister himself has been very supportive of a number of components that were put to him for discussion, and the process from here is that he has briefed his department of his support for those components. And the organisation is working with the department to bring those to fruition. As the department and government agree on those components, then they will become public policy of the department, or of the government rather, in which time they'll become public information. So we can certainly say that we are having very positive and solid discussions with the government, particularly the health minister, his staff and the department, concerning actions that will greatly benefit our patient cohort, our clinicians, and improve the way wounds are treated for hundreds of thousands of people in Australia. But the specifics of those that will have to go through the process and work out, and then as they're finalised, then that information the board will be able to gleefully tell everyone about and how wonderful we're actually doing. So it's really great. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake. We are starting to get some questions through now. We have a question from Jeff Sussman. Will the selection committee for the new CEO include a non-board member? And if not, why not? Just looking for a board member to answer that question. Hayley, thank you. Just need to unmute Hayley.
It's always one in the group. Thank you, Professor Sussman, for asking that question. The answer is we have selected a committee. They are made up of board members at this time. We want to make sure that we get the most appropriate person into the role. That's not why we haven't gone elsewhere, but it's just so that we can make sure that we get the right person and move forward for the next year ahead.
Thank you, Hayley. We have a question from Francis Henshaw. What were the most impactful activities in Wounds Awareness Week? Thank you, Blake.
All right. So we'll talk about Wounds Awareness Week as a holistic campaign, because obviously this meeting's focused on the previous financial year, but there's obviously been the most recent campaign. But the answer is pretty much the same for all of them. So Wound Awareness Week, its goal now is to be an anchor campaign around our advocacy work in totality. So it's not just a standalone week that we put up there in order to celebrate the fact that there's clinicians that are doing a great job treating patients. That's important, but that's not the reason we hold Wound Awareness Week. The reason we hold Wound Awareness Week is to act as a centrepiece to a 12-month advocacy plan, which basically means that we're talking to state and territory governments as well as the federal government, talking about the various things that they can do to support clinicians and support patients. So it's funding, it's consumables, it's working conditions, it's structures for primary healthcare. It's very wide-ranging discussion. And then we're using Wound Awareness Week as a reason to start talking about it in the media and getting attention in order to basically ask governments to do something in order to meet the timeframes that we're setting. If we don't have a week like Wound Awareness Week, then when we're having discussions with government, it's very easy for government to say, oh, yes, that's very well and good. We'll look at it next year. We're busy this year, COVID, other things. If we say, oh, well, what are you doing, government? By the way, we're holding Wound Awareness Week in late August every year. It'd be really great if you had an announcement, because we will be talking to the Australian or the ABC or Channel 9 and talking about these issues and really asking, why isn't government dealing with these problems? We know they exist. We know they're hurting people. We know they're expensive. Now, with the week shaped in that fashion, we've got a reason for government to act, and we've got a way to hold them accountable to actually achieve outcomes that are really important to patients and clinicians alike. So that's probably the biggest benefit and biggest way that we've changed the way Wound Awareness Week is used in order to elicit outcomes. And we're seeing that success on the back of the Wound Awareness Week that we've recently just delivered.
Thank you, Blake. At the moment, there are no more questions, but we will wait a minute or two to see if other people wish to ask questions. So on the assumption that there are no further questions, because no more have come through, I will hereby thank you for your attendance at this annual general meeting of Wounds Australia. I wish you all the very best in the next year. May it all be a little easier for us all in relation to COVID, for all of you and everyone else in the community. And I declare this annual general meeting closed.